18 hours. The hum of her echelon trace softened as the trees thickened around her, turning the winding road into a tunnel of pine and gold-streaked sunlight. Alice leaned slightly into the last curve, boots snug against the stirrups, the wind tugging playfully at the edge of her hood. The sleek hoverbike responded with obedient grace, more machine than muscle, more glider than beast. She pulled up at the park's edge, where the asphalt widened into a cracked, mossy lot marked Red Pine Entry Station, North Sector. The lot was packed. Hoverbikes, all-terrain cruisers, family-sized campers with neon canopy awnings jostled for space. Drones buzzed lazily overhead like flies, snapping pictures and delivering beers. A couple of children chased a trail of robotic dragonflies. Their squeals echoed through the trees, quick bursts of sound that faded into rustling leaves. Alice pushed the power button. With a mechanical hiss, 3 stabilizer struts extended from the bike and touched down, planting the chassis against the uneven ground as the engines turned off. She pulled off her helmet and ran a hand over her short, practical pixie-cut hair the color of overwashed straw, before swinging a leg over the side with a confidence like she'd done this a dozen times before. She hadn't. She squinted at the crowd, dozens of campers bustling toward the main trail. Some were already arguing about tent placement. She stood there for a second, helmet tucked under one arm, watching the shimmer of other campers trickle in. Families with chattering kids, couples unloading tents and supplies. A few solo hikers who looked like they could wrestle a bear and win.
Totally normal,
she muttered.
Just another camper out on a routine soul-searching trip to reconnect with the forest gods or whatever.
She popped the hovercart release and watched it lower smoothly from the bike's rear rack. The rugged gunmetal gray container hummed softly as it hovered a few inches off the ground. Inside was every single item she'd bought exactly how he'd recommended, including the storage container. The guy. Xander. Stupid, charming, nature-loving man with dimples and an eco-ethics minor. This was supposed to be their trip. He talked about his secret spot like it was holy ground.
Tucked away, bottom of the hill, right near a little stream. No one goes there. Trust me.
And she had. She trusted him all the way to the outdoor gear shop, where she let him help her pick out a smart tent, collapsible cookware, a fire-safe camp stove. He'd even paid for the campsite entry as an early birthday gift. And then, surprise. He'd forgotten. He had a volunteer medical shift in Sector 4 that weekend.
Total brain fog,
he'd said with that guilty, boyish grin.
But you should still go. You'll love it. I mean, unless you don't feel like going alone.
She'd shrugged. Said she was fine. That solitude was kind of the point.
Liar,
said the little voice in her head. She pulled up the site map on the patch tab on her wrist, adjusting the display until the topographical overlay showed the gentle slope of the Red Pine Hills. Her finger traced the digital trail toward the secluded spot Xander had promised.
You got this,
she told herself, shouldering her pack. The hover cart, sent to her patch tab, trailed obediently behind.
Just one girl and her carefully curated emotional recklessness, off to commune with nature.
Her boots crunched softly against the scatter of leaf litter. The crowd at the trailhead faded behind her. She had a destination, a borrowed confidence, and 3 tutorials on solo forest safety queued up in her memory drive.
If he asks me about it Monday, I'll make it sound like it was no big deal. Like I do this all the time. Like I was made for this.
She smiled to herself because that fantasy, that was the last comfort she'd get for a long, long while. 10 hours, Red Pine Forest, North Sector. By the time Alice reached the secluded spot Xander had described, her hair was plastered to her forehead, and the backs of her knees felt like they were about to fall off. The trail hadn't even been that steep, just long enough and warm enough to remind her that outdoorsy was more of a theoretical concept in her life. The sun was still up, barely slanting gold through the canopy. but in the forest's belly, it already felt like dusk. She probably should have turned back when the sun dipped behind the trees, but pride, as usual, voted no. She spotted the hollow at the base of the hill, just as he'd said. A shallow bowl of earth shielded from high winds and shaded by a cluster of pine trees. A stream meandered nearby, murmuring to itself like it was mid-conversation with the rocks. It really was beautiful, which made the tightness in her throat feel even more pathetic. She sat on the nearest flat rock, shrugged off her pack with a tired grunt, and took a long drink from her water bottle. Less because she was thirsty and more because the lump in her throat was getting bigger and threatening to climb out of her mouth. The cold water helped. A little.
You're here now.
She told herself.
Might as well make it look good.
But in the back of her mind, she was already planning to leave first thing in the morning. She stood, squared her shoulders, and pulled the hover cart beside her. A couple of taps sent 4 short legs extending beneath it, anchoring it to the uneven ground with a pneumatic hiss. The lid lifted, revealing her brand new gear, pristine, untouched by dirt, experience, or memory. Thankfully, she hadn't tossed the tent instructions, despite the very strong temptation to act like she'd already memorized them. The smart tent, to its credit, sprang upright the moment she unrolled it, then immediately sagged to one side like a drunk jellyfish. Alice cursed under her breath and tried to brace it with her knee while jabbing randomly at the activation strip. It shuddered, twitched, and listed harder, now flopping sideways with the stubborn enthusiasm of something that knew she'd skipped step 3. With a groan, she yanked the manual from the cart.
Miss the corner lock sink?
She muttered. Of course. One quick recalibration and an awkward shuffle later, the tent stood properly. She crouched, secured the last corner, and pressed the auto-lock peg into the soil until it clicked. The fabric rippled, then tensioned itself into a neat, perfect shape with a soft mechanical shudder. Smug somehow. She stood back to admire it, hands on her hips.
Looks cool,
She said to the air.
very camo chic.
Her lips twitched into a brief, crooked smile. Gunmetal wasn't her color. Not really. She preferred softer tones, lighter palettes. The kind that didn't scream battle-ready. But when she and Xander had gone shopping for gear, he pointed to the display model and said,
Now that one looks serious. Like don't mess with me serious.
and just like that, she'd bought it. Because apparently, she wanted to look like someone not to mess with. At least to him. Now, standing here alone, swatting insects off her cargo pants, and 1,000 thoughts nipping at her heels. She told herself she liked it. It was practical. It was neutral. It was definitely not because of a guy. No. She turned away and started unloading the hover cart, ignoring the stubborn heat rising to her cheeks. She unrolled the rug insert next and patted it down flat, its off-white fibers smoothing out over the tent floor like a clean canvas. Then came the camp bed, smooth, inflatable, and allegedly came with spinal alignment support according to the packaging. It gave a soft thump as it unfolded, and Alice hoped that it was as comfortable as it looked. She admired the off-white rug and dove gray bed and smiled, much more her style. Then came the fun part. She set up her new camping chair, pulled out the collapsible rack, unfolded it with a flourish, and began lining up her supplies like they were part of an interior design spread. Compact stove, sealed food packs, multi-use utensils, her collapsible pots and pans, still shiny and unscratched, and a tiny solar kettle that would probably boil 2 sips of tea and call it a day. Last came the string lights, small matte bulbs strung on a thin wire that responded to voice commands. She strung them between 2 low tree branches and told them to glow soft amber, the default setting for serene wilderness influencer. Stepping back, she took it all in. Gunmetal tent, off-white rug, duff gray bedding, beige cookware and utensils. Everything neatly arranged with a kind of aesthetic efficiency that whispered, I totally know what I'm doing, even though she'd just followed the instructions on a card that still smelled like factory ink. If anyone wandered by, they might actually believe it.
Eat your heart out, Xander.
She muttered, and for a second, it almost felt like she meant it. Naturally, after all that effort, there was only one logical next step. With a flick of her thumb, Alice disengaged the patch tab from her forearm. It uncurled like a lazy lizard shedding its perch, flexing into a smooth, rigid screen. She tapped on the camera icon and flipped to wide angle. It was time to document the most curated display of rugged independence the Red Pine Forest had ever seen.
Okay,
She whispered, swiping her bangs out of her face.
let's make this look effortless.
She crouched slightly to get a shot from just the right angle. Tent in the background, cookware and chair arranged like it belonged in a minimalist survival magazine, string lights casting a warm amber glow over everything. It actually looked peaceful, intentional. She snapped a few photos, adjusted a pot in the chair, and took another from the side. Then she turned the camera on herself. She frowned. Her face was flushed from the hike, and the wind had turned her pixie cut into a chaotic little crown. She looked like a lost student who wandered into a camping catalog shoot. She tilted her head, raised an eyebrow, gave a little half smile that said,
Just me thriving in the woods. No big deal. Definitely not trying to impress a certain forgetful pre-med student. Just me thriving.
She saved one to her private archive, tagging it Field Independence Exercise Day 1. Like this was part of some academic field study, not a spontaneous coping mechanism. Another one where she looked mostly composed made it to her social grid with no caption. Because nothing said I'm totally fine like a well-lit, emotionally cryptic photo in the woods.